Hello, Martin.
Angela,
Thank you for thank you for being with us in this interview for the Centenary Project. Um, as you know, well, there are some very generic questions. We will really appreciate to know your views about the Stafford and your relationship with the Stafford that was particularly close. So, very excited to hear about you. The first question is, how did you know about Stafford and his ideas in the first place?
first I learned about the Bible system model, not about him personally. I met him personally a little bit later in 1999 in Toronto. But first I learned about his theory in the Bible system model at the University of St. Gallen, where Fred Malik was a professor. He was teaching it. He was one of the pioneers because, as you know, the Bible system model, managerial cybernetics were basic foundation for what was later becoming quite famous in the German-speaking areas of Germany, at least, as the Sankala management model, the system-oriented management model. And after that, 1999, that was the year after we had established Teams Integrity Europe, and we were meeting Stafford to talk about further collaborations. And that was quite an impression he made us because he met us. We were three of us, and he met us on eye level. And instead of lecturing us, he was asking us questions about what we have learned about practical applications and what we think was missing, what we should add to the process, things like that. And to me, actually, that was a start. It was like falling into the rabbit hole in Alice's Wonderland. A journey started there, a marvelous journey, a wonderful journey, actually. And it was also a start of a personal tutoring I got from Stafford in the following 3 years before he passed away. And the personal tutoring, actually, that was about the Bible system model. And there, the interesting thing was that one of the first things was that he will teach us how to apply the Bible system model, me and the colleague, Peter Stadelmann. But he said, I will do that on on the two conditions, actually. One is that somebody has to swallow the pill. So you have to have a real practical application case. And that had an impact in my thinking also because the practical application and learning from practical applications in order to refine the theory rather than to talk and think about the theory itself. That was one of the guiding principles of my professional career later on.
Thank you, Martin. And how did his ideas influence or change your life work?
Well, that was one thing. The other condition, the second condition he said he was that he will do this tutoring on the condition that I will teach it to at least 12 other people. And as it turned out, it became thousands of other people, thousands of managers in my 30 years of professional career. Because from 99 on, I focused on integration and on the application of the Bible system model. And I'm still doing that. So I have now about 30 years of experience in doing that, and I learned quite a lot of it, quite a lot out of that. Maybe the most important thing I learned was that the value system model was difficult to positioning right because managers we were talking to, we were giving trainings to managers, CEOs, out of different organizations, not only companies, but also NGOs, ministries, public organizations, and so on. And they typically saw the Bible system model as an alternative organizational model, alternative to what they had with their organization charts and with their process descriptions and so on. And they saw it as quite academic, and nobody was interested therefore in it because why should we bother with that? And it's too complicated, it's too academic, and so on. And to get that right, that was an important step. And what helped getting it right was to positioning it as, if you take the metaphor of the organism for an organization, not as the anatomy of the organization and not as the physiology of the organization, structural processes, but as the neurology of the organization. So the question of decision taking, of the regulation for viability, who decides what, based on what information, who needs to inform whom, and so on. And that has to do, of course, with structure. But getting the neurology right, that was really a door opener for managers, because they all had difficulties with their decision structures, their steering structure, their leading structure, if you want to call it like that. And the communication was always a problem. And so that opened the ears and eyes of managers, and that was really a breakthrough to positioning like that. A third dimension of organization, which has been completely forgotten by classic organizational theory, which talks about structural processes, org charts, and agile processes.
Excellent. And this is precisely the title of your book, of your new book, The Neurology of Organization. So you
Exactly.
have managed to do a really interesting way of summarizing all these ideas from Stafford in the way that you practice them. And that takes us to the next question. What do you, how do you summarize? What do you think that Stafford's most important contributions to science were?
Well, I think cybernetics, Fred Malik positioned cybernetics as the science of functioning, which I think is quite an interesting way to see it. The science of making things work, a science of making things function. And that has been widely applied to technical systems, whereas Stafford was the pioneer in applying it to social systems. And the application of managerial cybernetics to technical systems has led to a revolution of the functioning. Computers, automation, AI today, and so on. And I think Stafford's contribution, if it would be applied more widely, would lead to a revolution in the functioning of social systems, like our organizations, like an EU, for example, or like companies, like healthcare organizations, whatever you name it. Things are not really working well. Um, we could start with the European Union, for example, or with the functioning of countries, or the functioning of cities, or the functioning of larger companies. And they're really struggling with their neurology. And typically they are asking then for better leaders. Well, we need leaders to help us out of the crisis. We have this multi-crisis situation nowadays. We run from one crisis into another. We have multiple simultaneous crises today. And I think it's not a solution to ask for better people, for better leaders. We should ask for how can we change the functioning of our social organizations to make it function with the leaders we have? Because better leaders, that is a dangerous thing, as we have seen from history. And I think that was the most important contribution of Stafford, to really make cybernetics applicable for social organizations.
Yeah. And do you think that Stafford's ideas work well in practice? Can you give us examples of your own experience of things that have really, really worked, putting it into practice?
Absolutely. At the beginning, we started with integration, as I told you. The VSM came after the tutoring based on diagnosing the system of it, obviously. Stafford spoke about how to apply it. But first, we started with the application of integration and make it widely um, useful for quite different contexts and different organizations. And I think I have personally led over 300, maybe 500 integrations. And the process turned out to be extremely robust. We were nervous, of course, because if we have 30 to 40 top managers together in a integration, um, then it really has to function. Otherwise, you're out of business quite quickly, as you can imagine. And we were nervous about will it work, and so on. And we had a poster in our logistics room. It always said, "Trust the process." Just calm down, trust the process. It will work, and it always did. It was an extremely robust process, regardless of the quality of moderators, for example, or of the quality also of the participants. And it always led to results that were astonishingly good, also from the perspective of the customers. We did applications also very complicated one, like for Volkswagen after the diesel crisis of Volkswagen on the top management level with the 30, 40 top managers of Volkswagen, with BMW, with EADS, and so on, with really large organizations with complicated situations. And it worked as well as with small organizations with 500 or 1,000 people. It always turned out to be excellent.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And what have you done to develop or implement Stafford's ideas? How can you summarize all the things that you've been doing in these 30 years?
Well, one thing was to make integration um, applicable to this wide range of things, and we developed. Well, the challenge there is always that you have to adopt the method to the concrete situation of the customers. And there is a danger in that because if you go away from the basic principles that make us integration, then you're in trouble. And making the wrong compromises was always not making the wrong compromises was also always a challenge. And over time, we found out what the real important principles are that you must not change, even if the customer requires it, and to build a software around these things and so on. But I think the most important contribution was, in fact, really positioning the viable system model as the neurology and not the anatomy and not the physiology of the organization. The neurology, the decision structure, the decision communication structure, the steering structure, and to develop also some kind of methodology. Because in trainings and in consulting applications, there's always the question, well, what will we do first? And there's 1,000 ways of applying the viable system model, as you know, and so you have to have an idea about what you're doing. And I developed over the years a 7-step methodology that proved to be also very robust and leading to results in all these hundreds of applications of the viable system model in different contexts also. And I see it actually a little bit as something like the ladder that you can use as a beginner to step up to the roof. And if you're becoming an expert, then you don't need the ladder anymore, and you do it as you like. But for the beginners to have some methodology to guide you through the application, it's based on diagnosing the system and on the tutoring I got from Stafford, obviously, and that was really helpful. So developing not only the neurology as science, that's important, but medicine is developing a clinical practice of the application of the neurology, right? And that clinical practice, I think, that is the most important thing that we need actually to really make it useful in the world, not only being a theory, but applied theory, and to learn to refine it from practical application. So sharing experiences, sharing different approaches and methodologies. How will you apply it? There's thousands of ways, but sharing the knowledge and developing that knowledge in our community, I think that's the most important thing also in the future.
Definitely. With no doubt, I think that you are perhaps the person with the wider experience in applying the VSM in the business context that I know of in a very rigorous, pragmatic, and useful way, respecting all the depth of the theory and understanding the constraints of putting
Yes,
this theory into very big business and
yes,
corporations. So
yes.
undoubtedly, this has been a really, really important contribution.
Yes, well, there's a lot of other people who have huge experience in applying it, like yourself, you
Yeah,
Patrick Hoverstadt, to name some, or
yes,
many others. But there was not enough sharing of our
yes.
learnings so far in the application, rather than to talk about the theory and the model itself, to talk about the application of the model. That's important.
And that's something very beautiful that is happening now through the Metaforum and the new system one of the Metaforum that we've been leading with under your leadership, the
Excellent.
quality and education system that has this purpose, not disseminating good practice,
Yes,
educating new people,
yes,
sharing, learning about methodology and
yes,
the challenges of implementations and so on. So really,
yes.
really important.
Doing the application research, so to speak. Yes.
Yes, yes. So anyway, if Stafford were alive today, what do you think? What do you think he would suggest we do to address today's world and its challenges?
Well, I think obviously the big challenge nowadays is AI, isn't it? Which is the latest development in the revolution of cybernetics to technical systems. And now to come up with the answer of social systems, how we will deal with AI now that we have that powerful instrument to make it really beneficial for humankind and not for itself, so to speak, l'art pour l'art, so to speak. I think that would be something where his ideas really contribute a lot because I see actually the Bible system model as the basic foundation to really apply AI in an organization in a meaningful way. Because you need to come up with a designed and not just naturally grown decision structure. You know, we have a lot of Frankenstein organizations out there. They have an anatomy that is functioning, they have a physiology that is functioning, but their neurology is, I just have not very nice words to express it because they're not really designed. They're just historically grown. And if you apply AI to that kind of structure, of decision structure, communication structure, it's doing better what shouldn't be done, actually making things worse by it. So you need to have that foundation of a designed decision structure before you can use AI in a meaningful way. And I mean, I think he would repeat what he has written already in Designing Freedom, that we're currently using it much too on the wrong side of the equation. They see that what other people are doing regarding applying AI to integrations, because they use it actually as a variety attenuation mechanism alone, and not very much as an amplifier. And I think Stafford's how Stafford saw it, we should really use it on as an acquire and variety attenuator on one hand, but also very much as an amplifier of variety. So not just making things easier, how we can write a text or something, but also really think about how we can apply it as a variety amplifier to our own intelligence. I think that's needed. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. And finally, can you share a moment or story where Stafford made a lasting impact on you?
Well, there's many of these lasting impacts, of course, but maybe the most important one was when I saw Stafford the last time in the hospital in Toronto in early 2002, and it was very special seeing him there for the last time. We all knew it was the last time we see each other, and I was whispering in his ear that we will carry on with his work, and I was expecting some kind of at least as pathetic answer, and it just said good luck. And
Typical of him.
well, I think that his generation developed the theory and the application of the theory. My generation, I think, developed the application to a high variety of contexts, and the next generation will have to refine that application research and learn more from applications, applying it more widely. And I also just can say good luck with that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Martin. I think that we have
Sure.
concluded. Thank you.